Hi everyone. Today's episode is guaranteed to keep you on your toes. I have 3 stories that will challenge your mind and keep you puzzled until there aren't any pieces left. You might even find that you're missing a few pieces. But first, cover up those toes and get them comfortable because they are about to be busy. But first, please tickle that subscribe button. Great. Now let's get into the stories. My grandpa always told me to watch the crows. They're guardians of the forest, he said. They'll tell you if a predator is out there. In my experience, that's always been true. I used to be an avid hunter, and I can't even count the number of times I've been given away by crows. If they see something in the forest, they call out, warning the others so that they can band together for safety. They do this most often with hawks and owls, but it transfers to just about anything in the woods they don't like. I lost a cat once when I was a kid. It was an indoor cat that snuck out of the house. I only found him hiding in the brush because a group of crows was relentlessly squawking in the trees overhead. Crows are interesting creatures, highly intelligent. They can mimic sounds just like ravens can, but they're often thought of as a nuisance bird. My grandpa was fascinated with them, and therefore I was too. Grandpa died in 1997, and I took it pretty hard. I didn't go to the funeral because I just knew I would be a mess, and I didn't want anybody to see me like that. He used to take me fishing when I was a kid to this little lake in northern Wisconsin. There was a campground just across from the lake, and instead of dealing with my grief alongside the rest of my family, I rented myself a campsite, and I took off north. It was weird being alone up there without him, and I hadn't been on the lake since I was a kid. It seemed smaller than I remembered. The campground was first come, first serve. There were no reservations. I was the only one there, but that wasn't too surprising given the time of year. It was starting to get cold, so while the lake did have a few other visitors during the day, I had the campground all to myself at night. It was definitely uneasy up there the first night, I'll admit that. I attributed it to being alone in the woods. I noticed a group of crows hanging around in the trees above me. I counted 7. They would caw here and there, I assume, at me. Crows don't typically like people in the woods. I survived the first night, but I didn't get much sleep. The crows woke me up a couple of times during the night with their racket. I was feeling pretty alone, so I ended up keeping a fire going through the night. Fishing was good the next day. So good, in fact, that I kept a couple of fish to feed the crows. I wasn't sure if they would take them since they seemed to distrust me, but I thought that maybe they would make a little less noise at night if they knew I was a friend. They took the fish, but they still kept me up at night. One was even friendly enough to take food from my hand. This went on for a few days. I fished all night and I came back to camp to make dinner and feed the crows. And they still woke me up every night at midnight. It seemed I wasn't as good at making friends as I thought. They woke me up again the following night, but it was different. Their voices were different. There was a sense of urgency this time. I thought back to what my grandpa told me about the crows and predators in the woods. I thought they were squawking at me, but suddenly I realized they might be alerting to something else out there. I grabbed my flashlight and my knife and unzipped the tent. I was greeted by a pair of red eyes from up in the trees directly across from me. I could almost see the outline of the creature, but it didn't look right. It was too big. Birds weren't that big. The crows were squawking like mad. I shined the light towards the creature, and I don't even know how to explain it without sounding crazy. What I saw was a bird the size of a man. It had dark-colored feathers, either black or brown. I couldn't tell with the flashlight. Its eyes were red, that much I know for certain. It appeared to have the proportions of a man, like it was half man, half bird. I could see feathers on its wings, but I wasn't sure about the rest of the body. I didn't know what it was or what to do about it, but I knew I was in danger. I shined the light right at it. It didn't flinch. The only weapon I had was a knife, and I wasn't about to climb a tree and fight this thing. The crows screeching and flying at it seemed irritated, so I started yelling. My yelling made the crows even crazier. and together we drove the thing off. And let me tell you, when it took flight, the whole forest shook. The thing was huge. I got out of there right at first light. It wasn't exactly the getaway I needed, but it was somehow comforting to have been helped by the crows. I don't know what the thing wanted me to do, but it must have been out there every night. The crows weren't squawking at me all those times. They were telling me that there was a predator out there. I just wasn't listening. To this day, I don't go into the woods if I hear any crows making a ruckus. I'm sure 95% of the time they're alerting to a cat or a hawk, but I don't ever want to run into that bird creature again in my lifetime. And I'm not taking any chances. For a very short time, back when I was in my early 30s, I worked at a very small ranch in southwestern Montana. Having only worked at this ranch for around 19 or 20 months, we had our handful of issues. The biggest thing being something that you probably wouldn't exactly believe. So I'm just going to tell you. What the owner called them was buffalo wolves, if that's even a real thing. I had never even heard that name up until his mentioning them. He thought they were some extinct form of wolves that had been around for a long time. But I guess this was actually a more advanced species of wolf than I had ever come to know. I'd seen them myself on several different occasions tearing into livestock, being smart enough to manipulate parts of the fence to make it seamless, like they had never even crossed there, or even as far as covering their tracks, like a stealthy thief looking to break and enter. All these things pointed to something other than a wolf, something far more advanced in intelligence, something far more human-like. Like I said, after having seen them myself, I know too much now. I don't claim to be an expert, but whatever you want to call them, buffalo, wolves, or what, these creatures are real, and they share far more, many human-like characteristics than I'd like to think. For starters, I saw them clear as day. Stand, walk, and live on two legs just like a human being would, having no problems maneuvering or walking around, acting just fine. They also appeared to move down onto all fours like that of a quadrupedal animal. Again, having no problems shifting between one or the other. Also, in my mind, this presented an issue of balance. Most animals, I'd like to think, if not all, that walk on all four simply can't walk on two. The balance of their body can't support two legs, but the way these animals' bodies were built, it looked just so natural. Even the upper chest, the shoulders, and the arms, they looked far too human-like. Everything about this animal was wrong. I'm very fortunate that I've not had any personal run-ins, at least any that were up close or violent. Thank the Lord. But the owner, on the other hand, had some personal accounts that he would never go into detail about. He was always too scared to talk about it. Gee, I wonder why. Before I decided to sit down and write this, I thought I would educate myself, read up on other encounters, or even through some of your episodes. While after listening to many of them, I guess I should say that I'm surprised, but not surprised by all the similarities that I too experienced. Like I mentioned, the intelligence, but I didn't deal so much with the aggressiveness as many of the other people that you talked to. But instead of seeing livestock slaughtered, I witnessed them stealing them and taking them off into the north end of the ranch, the area where they were coming through the forest. But what happened to the livestock? I can only guess they were eaten, but personally I was never tasked with going out to find the cadavers or any remains. That was well beyond my pay grade. And I think the owner actually liked me, so he never wanted to task me with such things. I have no idea if he did that himself, but any time that he knew these things were taken or had taken his livestock, he would just count it as a loss. He also seemed really apprehensive about doing any sort of self-defense against these animals, creatures, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know, some sort of bio-anomaly because I've never seen an animal that acted more like a human. I guess maybe if you think of an ape, but this was frighteningly smart. These things' overall ability to problem solve, think ahead, strategize, work in groups, and have a complete actual understanding of the environment around them and how to work it to their good or their desire is just as frightening as it is admirable. I don't know if these creatures dwell in certain areas of the country, or maybe they're just a West Coast anomaly. Maybe they live on the East Coast too. Again, after listening to many encounters and reading other encounter stories, they seem to be everywhere. Not just in one part of the US, but even Canada, Europe, Australia, even parts of India, I take it. I'm not sure what they are. I would think that they're some sort of common species of unknown animal. But maybe animal isn't even the term I should be referring to them by, just because of how much like us they are. But back to my writing here. This is something that I witnessed firsthand. There were two of them that I saw, a larger one and a smaller one. The larger one wasn't as big as the largest one that we had seen, which I believe was the alpha male. This one, I guess you could call it a medium-sized one, was roughly 6 to 7 feet. Pretty decent build. The smaller one was probably closer to 5 feet, maybe a tad under, much more slender in build. I don't know how much younger it was, but I'm assuming it was younger. They were both running in a group when the big one stopped and noticed it had left tracks on the ground. It quickly did this hand gesture to the smaller one, alerting it down to the ground, and they both began intelligently covering up tracks. At least that's what I assumed they were doing, considering there was grass in the way, and the soil was soft. If you were to walk over there, you would leave tracks in with your boots. So the very next day, there was no sign of any tracks. My boots did leave a mark, though, in the soft soil, and that's how I came to the conclusion that they were marking up their tracks at the time. When I saw them do this the previous evening, I wasn't exactly sure what they were doing, until the next day when I realized that they were indeed covering tracks. How they did it, I'm not sure, because even as I stepped back and kicked dirt over my tracks, trying to replicate any way that they cover their tracks, it didn't quite fully work. And I don't have a great way to accurately describe how to cover up soil, at least the way these things did. I will say that being large as they are, there's no way that they cannot leave tracks. I'm 200 pounds soaking wet, and even I left a considerable impression in the soft soil with my boots. These things, being much larger in density, they had to know what they were doing. No animal I've ever heard of is able to go back and cover their own tracks. I mean, what kind of predators exactly are we dealing with? Well, my 19 or 20 months were then up, and I moved out of state, down to Northern California. I eventually lost contact with the owner because I think he either moved or changed his number. I'm not sure, but I don't really want to go back to think about what he had to deal with. And we didn't really talk about the whole buffalo wolf thing as a whole bunch. It was talked about sometimes and mentioned here or there, enough that I guess you can consider it a topic at hand, but it wasn't part of our daily activity or daily conversation. It was only brought up every once in a while, and very briefly, if any. Although there were conversations of concern here and there, enough that I knew they existed after having seen them myself. I thought I would send this in to you and add in my 2 cents of my encounter with these animals, or creatures, or beings. I'm not sure what you refer to them as, but either way, I know they're out there. I know they exist. And who truly knows what they're capable of? They've been trying to make us forget the word UFO, haven't they? I find that most people are upset about that. Well, either upset or indifferent. I'm not one of those people. I'm thrilled, actually. Every time I want to tell somebody that I saw a monster in the sky, their response is always the same. You mean a UFO? And that's not what I mean. The image of metallic orbs and giant discs with little green pilots could not be further from the creature or monster that I saw. I saw a monster. The new term is UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. I'm not sure which is true now, but it doesn't matter. What's important to me is that phenomena rings a little bit truer than object. Object implies that this thing didn't have a mind of its own. Phenomena at least captures the terrifying wonder that paralyzed me the moment I saw it. I used to watch the clouds. I would paint landscapes absolutely spotted with them. For inspiration, I often went out and gazed at the springtime sky. I don't do that anymore. One afternoon, I saw the thing in the clouds. It looked like a speck at first, something small and black hidden in the cumulus. A plane, I thought, or maybe a drone capturing footage for the latest GPS systems. And then it turned. I saw the head and the wings as the creature's body pivoted to change its path in the wind. I saw those wings beat, and I heard the thunderclap that followed. And then it got closer. It fell towards the earth like a meteor, and then I saw a hooked beak and talons as long as swords. How could I run? I'd never even seen anything so mystifying. All my years spent painting the sky, and I had never once spotted this creature. Had it been there all along? Soon I could feel its shadow blocking me from the sun. It then dove underneath the clouds, and I could see its brownish feathers. It then passed over my head and then climbed back into the sky. It could have scooped me up like an owl with a mouse. I would have slid down its throat in just one bite. Would my remains ever have been found? Where was this thing hiding, I wondered. The area around me was far too flat to conceal a creature of that size. It must have come from far away. But how long could it stay in flight? And how far would it have carried me? Would my screams have traveled to the ground, or would I have been a silent blur in the clouds? The questions came all at once, and they haven't gone away. I did the only thing I thought I could. I called the authorities. Animal control led me to the park district, who led me to the FBI. I thought that was odd. Why would the FBI involve themselves in a story like this? I met a few agents at a diner, and I wanted our conversation to be public. The diner, just my luck, was mostly empty when the two men in sunglasses slid into the booth across from me. I spotted a third in the parking lot. I thought I saw another headed around the side of the building. There were enough of them to make me nervous. All I wanted to do was tell somebody what I saw and to have them believe me. I wanted to know what the monster was because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to forget the creature. I tried to go back to painting, but I couldn't tear the image of the giant beast from my mind. It was always there, hidden in my landscapes. If I was ever going to sell a painting again, I knew I needed to get to the bottom of the mystery, and I thought that these agents could help me with that. Instead, they asked about my background. They asked if I had a history of drug use or mental health issues. Of course I struggle with mental health, I said. I'm an artist. Or at least I wanted to be. They didn't laugh. They didn't even crack a smile. Instead, they reminded me of my grandfather. Early onset dementia. They warned me of what my family might think if I kept talking about this monster. They warned me that my public reputation would be ruined, and any dreams I had of being an artist would be carried away by the wind. They were trying to scare me. I knew it, but it worked. I ended up signing a document that dismissed my claims and said it was a natural occurrence, a trick of the light supposedly, the sun reflecting in the clouds on a day when I was particularly vulnerable. It made even less sense than the real story, actually. But the lie was easier for people to swallow. It was easier for them to dismiss. I realized then that they hadn't come to investigate the creature. They had come to bury the story. And they did. A few times I got drunk and I tried to tell somebody what I had really seen. They said, "You mean a UFO?" And I said, "No, that's not what I mean. Aren't you listening? I saw something else. I saw something that has lived here for a very long time, and it's always been just out of sight, perfectly obscured by the clouds above us. I saw something that could have struck the ground like lightning and carried me into the sky. Why wouldn't they want us to know, I wonder? Is it because they've seen the creature too? Are they hiding it? Protecting it? Are they scared of what might happen the moment we realize our airspace has never truly been safe? Would we turn against them or demand that the beasts be hunted to extinction? Would that be so bad? One body is all I need. One great beast splayed out on a runway for all the world to see. Maybe then, my story wouldn't be explained away as the hereditary fragments of my grandfather's tragedy.